How much would Florida State benefit by joining the Big Ten?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back into another episode of Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Today, I'm going to break down some numbers, talk a little bit just from my heart about what I think about it. And then I am also going to hit and start with recruiting, why the Big Ten would be a boom for the Florida State Seminoles. So let's jump right in with that first subject. And again, it is recruiting. Going to do mainly three topics here. Going to talk about the recruiting first, going to talk about the numbers, and then at the end, going to talk about the rivalries, this kind of fun stuff, because some of the rivalry games and the stadiums of the Big Ten are great. They have massive crowds. So going to delve into all three of those categories. Recruiting first. Last year, there was a young man that I spoke with at IMG Academy, TJ Lindsay, and he decided on Auburn. And I didn't know why, and I'm just interviewing him for a buddy of mine, and he's talking to me and unsolicited. He said he would have selected Miami, but there was a problem. And the problem was Miami was not in the Southeastern Conference. Period. One reason, one checkbox, nothing else. That's a problem, because that impacts everybody. That could have just as easily been Florida State, just as easily been Clemson or whatever. Florida State had just started to come back into it. I don't know if it had been the same situation if Florida State had been involved with him and it had been after this past season, because winning matters. But it's just the point that it's a precedent that the Southeastern Conference, when I speak with recruits at all these different places around the country, 7-on-7 tournament in Texas or Elite 11 in LA or whatever, it's still SEC I hear a lot about. The other one that's closest to comparing it to is the Big Ten, and the revenue and the facilities and the tradition are pretty close. So I'm going to do what the SEC would do for Florida State fairly soon. But today I want to do the Big Ten because it's an interesting piece from a social perspective, financial and everything else. But I think that the recruiting in the Big Ten would probably help them win some of those battles that Florida State may not win against Georgia or Alabama, et cetera, because they're in a better conference than they are in the ACC. Now, if Florida State goes in the SEC, I still think that's the easiest recruiting win there is. They would benefit from the Big Ten, but I'm here to tell you, SEC would exponentially change Florida State's trajectory in recruiting. It just would, because of location. But Big Ten is more intriguing because there's more sub-points to it. So that's why I'm doing this. A couple of points. If Florida State was in the Big Ten, and pick whatever year you want, and the schools were about the same in terms of cachet as they are like now, Texas, Bama, Georgia, which ones would you be as concerned about winning head-to-head when you really delve in, take the Florida State glasses off, because they do not win as many battles against Texas, Florida State, or Georgia and Alabama as they would like. They don't. Would they win more if they were in the Big Ten? You darn right they would, because it's one of the two conferences that truly matter. And I'll get into some numbers here in a second. And I wasn't even as privy to this as I thought. It's more outlandish than I'd ever thought when I really started reading some articles and some stats. It's absurd, the difference in financial revenue moving forward. So that's another point. But the cachet with the kids, they think the SEC and the Big Ten are the only two conferences. I have not heard one kid talk about, I can't wait to play in the ACC or Big 12 this year at any event. Not one. So yes, it matters. Big Ten brings into the conversation, you get to play against Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State or Wisconsin, playing in a game at Iowa. Like, these places are 70, 80, 90, 100,000 and more to the rim. Kids want to play in front of that. Of course they do. Now, some of the stadiums in the ACC do that. Like, Clemson's probably got about as nutty a fan base as there is. Florida State's is really good. NC State's got some pretty good fans. North Carolina's got a pretty good fan base. But it falls off pretty quick after that. Miami's obviously all over the place. Unless Florida State or Notre Dame playing down there, they can't sell out. Anybody else in the league? Not really. In the Big Ten, schools in the Big Ten, the old Big Ten West, that are just mediocre will sell out. It matters. So that's part of it. I think that kids want to play in those kind of environments. Why would you not? If you're a competitor, it's pretty simple. You want to go into somebody else's field and just not only play well, you want to take that crowd out of the game and be able to look up and say scoreboard. I know that's one of the things when I was a kid, whether it was basketball or football or whatever, there was nothing like a road win. I think that's something that kids look forward to, and it's the same in the SEC. You go into the Swamp, you go into Rocky Top, you go into Baton Rouge and Death Valley or whatever. Those are cool places to go and win games. So it has some intrigue, and it will help you. As far as recruiting specifically against the SEC in general, I think it's self-explanatory. If you're in one of the two conferences, it matters, SEC or Big Ten, you're on equal footing. There's a perception that they're going to get more teams in the playoffs, and the way it's being bargained out, it kind of looks that way too. So that's the other part. Instead of coming in first or second, the ACC, you're risking being out of the league or out of the college football playoff. You don't know. Maybe there's 3 teams you get in, but it's going to be hard. I do not think kids understand all this stuff, and I haven't had one kid bring up like the new revenue sharing stuff or any of the legalities. These kids do not read that stuff like adults do. They have zero interest. They are very simplistic. SEC, Big Ten, and everything else. That's it. They don't know the numbers I'm about to go over with the finances and all that. They just want to play in those leagues in front of those big crowds, and they just kind of expect the money to come. They're lump sum at that age. 16 to 18-year-olds do not consume the way adults do in terms of the finite terms of all the money that goes into this. With that being said, I think Florida State right now, if I was to guess for the 2025 class, it'll finish somewhere between 5 and 8 is my projection. National. It's going to be a really, really good class. That's my guess. If they were in the Southeastern Conference, I would say it would finish between 3 and 5. If they were in the Big Ten, probably the same thing. Worst, 4 and 6. It matters. If you just get one more recruit, just one, that's an elite player, it changes your program each year. It could be that 5-star defensive tackle that I harp on all the time. It could be a player that is very good, maybe another receiver or whatever, that you just have in there to compete, that you would have lost to, I don't know, Missouri or Tennessee or Arkansas, whatever it is. Doesn't matter where he's from. One more recruit a year, conservatively, can change your class, especially if it's 5-star, obviously. But even another 4-star kid that's a top 100, top 150 player, it's going to change your program. If you do it every single year, absolutely. So I think Florida State joining the Big Ten is a boom for recruiting. And to be really honest with you, I don't think it's all that debatable. Just from talking to the kids face to face, off the record, the only schools they talk about are Big Ten and SEC. So while I think the SEC is the better thing for recruiting, it's not by a huge gap. And as I get into some finances here in just a second, there's some reason to believe the Big Ten overall could be better in some ways too. So we're going to talk about that next on Locked On Seminoles. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, you may not have time and the resources to hire the way that you really want to. It's not an easy process, and there are a lot of things to go through. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier for you to get your team on the fast track. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process a little bit easier and quicker for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's talk the business end of this to kind of back up the recruiting that I just discussed. This didn't take very long, and some of the reading wasn't quite as thick as I thought it would. Some of these articles, I think they've gotten smart enough to know that people don't want all the legal jargon. I'm going to throw out some numbers that are Big 10, Big 12, and ACC. Okay. Going to kind of just look at this from a perspective of, well, how much are you making? Just bottom line, here are the projections, et cetera, for these TV contracts coming in for the next few years. All right. You got to think about it because this impacts your coaches, your training, your facilities, all the perks that your programs, all these kids that are recruits want. This is why it's so important. The Big Ten has a $60.5 million per school deal with US, according to USA Today. The Big 12, it's nowhere near it. Through 2031 for the entire conference, it's only 2.28 billion. I mean, it's still billion. I get it, but they've got like 14 schools. It's nowhere near. It's somewhere on like 30 million a year. Big 10, 7 years, 7 billion in that same time span. And it actually finishes a year early, 29 to 30 season. The Big 12 is 2030 to 31. So it's a year difference. And it's over twice as much. It is actually over 3 times as much. Look, there's just no way around it. There's some nuances with the Big 12 because they got new schools and they're not making quite as much. Some of the traditional Big 12 schools making a little more than like UCF or Houston or whatever. But if you're a double and triple the pay of the other schools that you're competing with on the recruiting trail or for facilities or hiring an athletic director, that's a problem. It's good for the schools that are on top, you would think, but I'll get into that in a second. There's some problems there. And then also you have to look at it like, is it going to be so much of a disparity that college football it's going to be so much haves to have-nots, and it's going to be a small group. We're going to be seeing 30 and 40-point games against teams that used to be rivals. That's what this money could do. Here's the ACC, and you can take this however you want, but it's around $30 million. That grant of rights, 2036, it's around $30 million. So the Big Ten is pushing about 3 times as much for them as well. I don't see how you can not come out to the conclusion that no matter how good a brand you have, no matter how good Norvell is or anything like that, that eventually it's not going to hurt you. You have to jump if you can. And I'm not saying I know that Florida State's going to go to the Big Ten. This is a hypothetical, obviously, but they're eventually going to get out of this contract at some point. I think that's fairly safe to say. And when they do, I don't see how the Big Ten wouldn't be a boom for them. The SEC numbers aren't all that much different than the Big Ten. It kind of depends on who does the most recent contract or who's better, what have you. It's debatable. But the Big Ten and SEC with the numbers really aren't all that different. So, again, I picked the Big Ten today. I'm going to do an SEC, why Florida State would benefit there fairly soon. I'll break down some numbers as well. But both the ACC and Big 12 are just so far behind each of these two conferences that the money, like talking about the facilities that Florida State is going to have, they're going obviously a massive renovation. If they had this money from the Big Ten right now, it would change the program. You can't say that 50 more million a year isn't going to help you. I mean, that's obviously ridiculous. Florida State, just like any other school, needs as much money as they can for this arms race. Facilities, the suites, the travel budgets, the ridiculous amount of contracts that they have with all the people in the back office, different ways to keep people from leaving when somebody like Alabama tries to come and poach your guy, or Texas, USC schools that got big pockets, Notre Dame, Ohio State. You better be able to pocket some money in the back for when those situations happen, because even if you're quote unquote definitively overpaying, if you don't, you're going to lose. You know, it's just the way it is. Everybody that goes and works in these recruiting offices, the strength and conditioning programs are as important as anything else in a college football environment at any school. If you're not overpaying, you're losing. That's the thing to think. Well, if you got $50 more million a year, it's a lot easier to do that. So the numbers are crazy. And I think it's probably the most fun thing to dive into once you see just how big the disparity is and to project it out. It's not my thing to do on every school, but like maybe I might do that for Florida State at some point. Like, what could you do over a 5-year period? That'd be $250 million. You'd change your facilities. You could pay just with the difference for one. What other things could you do? Hire a great basketball coach, hire a great volleyball coach, AD. Maybe he's the most highly paid AD in the, whatever it is you want to do. You just have a plethora of possibilities. You could write a thesis on it. Florida State needs to get out of the grant of rights and all the garbage with the ACC sooner and later so they can start taking advantage of this. We both, the people out there and myself know there's going to be the ACC that's left behind for the Big Ten or the SEC. We don't know which one yet. But again, the money's similar. There's no way this isn't going to help Florida State just incredibly. And of course, the recruiting budget, as an add-on to what I talked about a little bit ago, is the other thing. It'll go through the roof. They want to recruit an LA kid. It's no big deal to send a coach to Los Angeles. Charter flight, whatever, go right ahead. Not necessarily the same for Iowa State. It's not necessarily the same thing for Purdue. You know what I mean? Some of these schools that were behind, now, depending on the league you're in, it is different because Purdue's getting all that money. They could actually do that because they're in the Big Ten. Iowa State in the Big 12? No, they're not. It's amazing what revenue sharing can do. A school like Purdue could go out and hire somebody they couldn't before, whereas Iowa State probably going to get left behind. The last thing that I want to talk about are the budding rivalries that would happen with Florida State in the Big Ten. This is just fun. This is from personal experience, talking to fans around the country, talking to recruits, high school coaches, buddies of mine that root for schools in the Big Ten, etc. People in the media that have told me stories, even stadiums that I haven't been to. I've been to some of them. But some of the things that I think would be great for Florida State and would recruit better because of it too. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. All right. Our other sponsor today is FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. And you can bet on it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can bet on anything from Finals MVP and who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If Florida State joins the Big Ten, which stadium would you be the most interested to go and visit and see a game? Camp Randall, where you could see Wisconsin and see the crazy jump around song at the end of the third quarter? Would it be the Big House? Would it be Ohio State? Would it be Penn State, where they got 112,000 people in there? Which place would it be? Rivalries in college football and the pure fandom are what make college football, honestly, my favorite sport of any, at any level on the planet. It's unique. It has special heritage. It has special trophies for some of these games. And who knows? Florida State might have a rivalry with Michigan State for some reason. Things happen after you play a team a couple times and rivalries develop. It's incredible how that works. And here are a few things that I just kind of like to add. It's for fun and some suggestions on if Florida State ever does go to the Big Ten, some things you should think about, because it's obviously going to Ohio State would be fun for a game. Okay, that's not really rocket science to figure that out. But what are some of the other places that would be fun and why? What are things you can do around there? The Big Ten would be fun for Florida State in the following ways. And here's just kind of a short list based on my own experiences. And again, some of the guys that I've talked to and some of the gals I know, like that have covered games in different places. So here goes. Iowa. That place is a special one for football. Their fans come out. They obviously play great defense. Special teams are very well coached. They just don't score a lot. But there's a lot going on there in terms of just how nice the people are. And I've heard great things about the environments there. People love to travel there to have a good time. They're downtown in Iowa City, the restaurants and everything. It would be a great place to go. Obviously, the culture is a gazillion times different than it is in North Florida, but that's what makes college sports great. Traveling to away games and seeing your team take on somebody, and probably in a state you haven't even been to before or barely at all, if nothing else. Not many people probably have traveled to Iowa. That would be a bucket list for me if Florida State joined the Big Ten. Another one, obviously, this is a city that has a lot of different cultural things. It's known for some of its big corporate entities like Target. Minnesota, they actually have an outdoor stadium now, which I think is dumb because that place is so cold. But downtown Minneapolis has a lot of things. They got the biggest mall in the United States. It's massive. It's got its own zip code. I think that would be really cool for Florida State fans to be something different. The Mall of America is what I was just talking about. In case you haven't heard about it, look it up. There's all kinds of literature about it. It's a great mall. And it's an opportunity, again, totally different culture. It's colder there. People from all over the place. It's a very transient city. It'd be a lot of fun. The other one, and it's a place that I've been, is Michigan State. That place gets bananas. When they have a decent football team there, Michigan State fans go crazy. And they're up and down. And right now they're obviously rebuilding. But I think Florida State against Michigan State, having those games would be fun. Michigan State, you just don't know. If you don't bring your A game, you can lose. And they sneak up on teams sometimes. But it's the environment that I'm talking about more than anything else. I've been to multiple games there before. That is a crazy place to tailgate. It is a crazy place to get in and out of. It can be hard. And it's also an area where football just means a lot. The people are very educated about football inside the state of Michigan in general, whether you're at UM or MSU. And quite frankly, I just think it's fun. The obvious ones out of the three, I'm honestly, Penn State is the one that's most interesting to me. And it's because the whiteouts and everything, I think they're great. But I don't know how that would work. Like playing Florida State, I have no idea how the Big Ten would they just rotate everything, or they try to get rivalries going. I have no idea, but that would be the one for me out of the traditional big three of Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State that I'd want to see, because that town, for those of you who don't know, it's at the bottom of Mount Nittany. It's in a valley, and there's nothing else there. It is a college town with the school there. There's nothing else. It is very, very unique. They've got an airport somewhere close now. It didn't used to. It was really hard to get in. It was like 2 roads to get in or out. That has changed a little bit. They've added some more modern stuff to it, but it's just in the middle of central Pennsylvania in the mountains. Very unique setting, and I just think that would be cool to be a part of a setting of 110,000+. I've been in a couple of those places like the Big House, but those fans, they got nothing else going on out there. That would be a lot of fun. And again, like I talked about earlier, going on the road and shutting up fans, Florida State used to do that. Like Bobby Bowden had the grass they would take from other stadiums and stuff after they won road games. Getting one at Penn State would be pretty cool. So that would be top of my board. Anyway, I appreciate everybody coming in, check everything out. Make sure this is your first listen in each and every day. I truly appreciate it. Hit that like button and that notification bell, and we will see you again on Wednesday. This has been Locked On Seminoles.